Hello, everyone. Maneco 4 here. We'll wait until a few more people come on. We've got 43 people already. 18 thumbs up. Let me know. Let me know if you are hearing me well. So the title of the live stream is "Strong Economic Recovery Before End of 2020 is Wishful Thinking." Yeah, we're hearing a lot of stories, especially in the US as well, about these new cases, second wave. It's all the talk. Even here in the UK, they're reopening the economy. I think 4th of July will be a big day, but we keep seeing headlines in the mainstream media uh, putting uncertainty in people's minds. So I think that's going to create a lot of uncertainty for businesses, uh, especially small businesses. And small businesses are a big part of the employment picture. I was just reading an article in the FT about the US economy and small businesses, small size mom and pop businesses. They provide for 50% of all employment. Big corporations only provide for about 10%. So I saw Anthony King um, talking about his property in Portugal, that he wants to sell a property, I think, in Canada. Short-term precious metals. I think he's just asked. Well, I don't really care what the short-term moves are too much in gold or silver, unless I'm going to buy some, I guess. Back in March, silver went below 12, and on that day I decided to buy some. But if you look at the last 50, 60 years, the only thing gold has really done in the long term is go up, and fiat currencies have gone down. I'm not concerned about other markets, the stock market going down, or interest rates going up and bonds going down, because I think we're going to continue to see money printing by the central banks, even though they're coming out now, like Bank of England, saying this is not forever. But even if they weren't going to create more credit, we already have all the debt, and I think the economies are not going to get back to normal for a long time. And is it an accident that this is happening? No, I think it's all by design. I recommend you go to my blog. The last two pieces I wrote there are pretty much about what I think this current crisis is all about. And yeah, and I've put it in writing because it's better, and it's more friendly, so to speak, with the censors, to put it in writing in my blog. But basically, I've spoken about this since March, that I think this is an engineered crisis. Yes, there is a bad flu or virus out there that hits especially elderly people. But I think they're, of course, exaggerating because they have an agenda. It's the globalist agenda, which they announced in the beginning of June. It was Prince Charles and Klaus Schwab, who's the head of the World Economic Forum, the people who organize the Davos meetings in Switzerland every winter. Donald Trump has been there twice as president. And that's where all the people who run the world, the big corporations, the big banks, big media, big government, they all go there, and it's been in the works for decades. And this is what they're trying to do. But I personally think there's a way of fighting this. Of course, it's an uphill battle. I think the way to fight it is to basically don't vote with your wallet. I just saw an a video by Carl Vernon, who I recommend. He's an English guy on YouTube, and he was talking about the new way to travel to Spain, for example. A lot of the British like going to Spain for holidays, and he said, "There's no way I'm gonna take this. I'm not gonna travel. I'm gonna." So if enough people say, "I'm not gonna go to a restaurant if I need to leave my phone and name and my address so they can track and trace me. I'm not gonna go." To a cinema or anywhere else where they have to take my temperature or make me wear a mask. If enough people boycott that, and I know it's not great, you won't be able to live your life as it used to be. But this is just, in my opinion, it's outrageous. So that's the way I'm looking at it. So we've got quite a few people already now, 200. Let's see. Hopefully, I didn't see if I can see any of your questions. Let's see. Padenda's here. Padenda Johnson. Hi, Padenda. Carl Vernon. Yeah, he's good, Carl Vernon. And also Vernon Coleman, Dr. Vernon Coleman, both Vernons. Let's have a look. Andrew Bennett, do you think that people in a year's time will regret not buying at today's heightened prices? Are you talking about gold? If you're talking about gold, I think in a year's time, a year ago, I did a video this morning about gold. It was kind of an update on the bull market. I call it the 21st century bull market. And last year, when gold broke out of the 1350 area, I said, this is just the beginning. There's a long time to go. And when I made my video, it was the 22nd of June. So just over a year ago, and it was at 1400. And now we're almost at 1800. So people shouldn't really worry about the fiat price. I think it was Bellin GP who made a video a few years ago about the price of gold in Venezuelan bolivars in the beginning of the inflation they had. The price of gold went up like from a few thousand bolivars to like 14,000, and it made like a double top on the chart. And if you'd sold the second time around at 14,000, then it went down to 10, you would have been really happy. But eventually, a year or two later, the price of gold was in the hundreds of millions. So I think that's the way we're going. As long as you can still exchange your national currency for precious metals, that's my opinion. I think it's the only way to go. Yeah, you do need fiat currency, of course, in your bank account to pay your bills, but I would keep it to a minimum. Things are not normal. Gold is not a trading, nor silver. They're not for trading. Yeah, you can trade the paper gold and silver, but as insurance against financial mayhem, and we're going to get financial mayhem, it's not trading, it's just insurance. And it's insurance that will pay off anytime because it's gold is the most marketable commodity, and that's why it's money. What does that mean? Well, you can sell it anywhere in the world. Oh, Girl OG, favorite dogs on YouTube, Billy and Lucy. Yeah, I saw that Jeff Berwick has got a little, she's a Chihuahua, I think. Lucy, she's cute. Yeah, it's, I actually interviewed Jeff Berwick about 4 years ago when I was starting my channel out. He was in London, and I went into London to see him, and I interviewed Jeff Berwick. He's a nice guy. Your thoughts, can deflation occur in an MMT or UBI economy? Well, we are having inflation right now. So MMT, of course, you're going to have, no, I mean, MMT means you're creating money out of thin air or credit, you're printing money. So that's inflation. So we haven't had well, at least in the United States, we haven't had actual deflation, like a collapse of the money supply, really, since the 1930s. And that's how you have to look at inflation, at deflation. Deflation is the destruction of the money supply. And I've looked at the numbers since the beginning of middle of February. M2 money supply in the US has gone up by 28%. So that's inflation. That's 28%. That's not annualized. That's just from February. So if you analyze it, we're looking more like almost 70%, maybe a little less. Yeah, Lucy likes tacos. Billy likes silver, of course. Phoenix FP, what's the latest with Glint? Well, the problem is not with Glint. Actually, the problem is with Wirecard, and a lot of other card companies are having a problem. Glint basically use Wirecard to settle transactions. So if you spend £100 in your Glint card, Glint will pay MasterCard via Wirecard. They're just a settlement counterparty. They don't keep any money with Wirecard, but the FCA in the UK, the regulator, decided to shut down the whole of the Wirecard UK operations. But actually, the CEO of Glint, I sent him a message, and he actually called me on WhatsApp because I was kind of disappointed. But he said they're going to be up and running. Nothing's happened to the funds or the gold in the Glint app or in your account. The only thing you can't do right now is use your card, but you can send your money to your other bank account, your main bank account. You may send more money into Glint. You can redeem your gold still. So nothing's happened. It's just Wirecard. And he told me as well, Glint will try to become an issuer directly with MasterCard so that they can basically settle the trades or transactions directly with MasterCard. Because I didn't realize a lot of credit cards or debit cards like MasterCard, they don't deal directly with people like Glint and others like Revolut. They have agents or people like Wirecard in the middle. So that's what's happened. It is disappointing. As I said, physical gold and silver, it's the best thing because there's no counterparty. You could have a counterparty if you store it, of course, and insure it at a private vault. Glint, there will be problems like this, but I think eventually, as Jason Cousins from Glint told me, they want to be less and less dependent on this system. And he admitted to me, the financial and monetary system is very corrupt, and he noted that. And one thing he says, he wants to one day that Glint becomes totally independent of the system. And I think they're going to bring a peer-to-peer function in July. I'm not sure when in July. So you'll be able to send gold directly and circumvent the card and the banking system. So you could technically pay people with gold for anything, as long as they also have the Glint app. So PSUEE5, thank you for the super chat. Jim Rickard says we are having deflation. Is he wrong? Maybe the old Merriam-Webster dictionary definition wasn't the right one. Well, I think it's Jim Rickards who's wrong. So because unless Jim Rickards wants to, well, yeah, I think Jim Rickards is wrong, because I would look back at Felix Sommery, who actually Jim Rickards mentioned in one of his books. He was an Austrian-Swiss banker in the early 1900s. And he says in his book, inflation is purely a monetary phenomenon. So if you have money supply growing at 28% since February, M2 money supply. I'm sorry, Jim Rickards, and I did interview Jim Rickards, and I'm looking to interview him again, but I don't agree with him. We don't have deflation. If Jim Rickards could honestly tell me also that in the last 20 years, everything that he needs to spend money on to survive, like shelter, food, travel, education, tuition, health. If he can tell me that those costs have gone down massively, then yeah, maybe. Well, even then, I would say we haven't had deflation. We've had prices going down. I think he's fallen into the trap of thinking that deflation is the CPI or that statistic that the Fed keeps track of. Phoenix FP40, thank you for the super chat. And PSUE, thank you again for the super chat. Look forward to the debate. Well, I contacted Jim Rickards, I think, end of May again. And his assistant said, well, he contacted me back, and he's finishing writing a new book. So he's been very busy. Hopefully he'll be on soon, but I haven't heard back. Murray, thank you for the super chat. Does inflation deflation depend on liquidity? Well, it doesn't. It depends on how much money and credit is created, how much credit is created into the system. Usually, under a sound money system, where for every let's say ounce of gold, you have to have a certain amount of, for every let's say dollar that you issue, you have to have certain amount of gold. If you over issue the credit more than the amount of gold you have or savings, then you have inflation. So basically, inflation is the abnormal creation of money and credit. Yeah, it's like a fractional reserve. For example, if you deposit an ounce of gold, let's say $20 worth of gold, an ounce of gold. Let's go back to the old amount. An ounce of gold was $20.67. If you deposit that $20 in the bank and they lent 100, that's inflation. But if they lent 20, that's not inflation nor deflation. So, and the deflation happens when the banks destroy that credit that they created. And they've created so much credit now, or inflation, that they can't allow the system to correct. They can't allow the deflation. And that's why the central banks keep adding onto their balance sheets. They keep creating, because they've inflated it so much, and they've lied, in my opinion. Well, they've lied. They've lied to the public, because we have had the greatest inflation since the early 80s of the system. And yeah, and you need to look at shadowstats.com. He talks about how they've tinkered with prices, because what inflation leads to, the consequence of inflation, is higher prices of everything. And we've had higher prices. And even if we say it's 2% CPI or 1%, that's still higher prices. Alex Miles, how does the easing of the Volcker rule impact the system? Why does the Fed pump more liquidity into the system than any other central bank by far? Well, the first question, the Volcker rule, it makes the banks even riskier. The Volcker rule was brought in after the 2008 crisis, and it limited how much prop trading the commercial banks, the big banks, JP Morgan, Citigroup, and all those big American banks, it limited how much the primary dealers or those big banks could do in prop trading. Why is the Fed the biggest money printer or credit creator? Well, because the US has the reserve currency. There's a lot more demand for dollars from other foreigners, from foreign investors and central banks than there is, let's say, for the euro or the British pound. And it's part of this exorbitant privilege that the United States or the dollar or Federal Reserve has had since World War II. But I think that privilege is a bit long in the tooth. Sorry if I don't see all the questions. As I said, there's always more and more of you, even though there's only about 330 today. We've had 500 before. Kiyosaki is a deficit devaluation fiat debt commie. That's June 12, 1776. I'm not sure. I don't think he's a commie. All he does, he takes advantage of the system, but I'm not sure he thinks it's the right system. But he's a clever guy. From what I heard, he learned about gold and silver and sound money back when he was in Vietnam during the war there. And when he came back, I think he started buying gold and silver back in the 70s. So I haven't heard more about what he thinks in terms of, but I actually don't think he's a communist, really. Mario, do you read Alt Market? Do you think Brendan Smith is correct? Golden Gate asks. I have read that blog before, but I haven't really read him recently, so I couldn't say. Brady Girding, what is going to pop the Fed printing bubble? I think higher interest rates could do it, and then a collapsing US dollar or Federal Reserve notes. That will pop it because they're holding more and more riskier assets. So if interest rates go up, all the assets in their books are going to lose value. So unless they print even more to cover those losses, and that's the thing, the Fed doesn't care about losses because you, the taxpayer, will pay for it. Because let's say, I think it was John Titus of Best Evidence, who I interviewed last Friday. He did a really good video about how the Fed would patch or pad its balance sheet if there were losses. Let's say they lost 100% on their junk bond asset purchases. That would mean that the balance sheet would shrink by however much they have in junk bonds. So if they didn't want the balance sheet to shrink and the money supply to shrink, they would probably get more and the Treasury to borrow more money from them. They would issue more, and that would dilute the currency again, of course. So bigger balance sheet, dropping dollar, higher rates. That's when the Fed's going to be in trouble. And that happened in the 70s. The dollar almost, I think the US Treasury even borrowed money in Swiss francs, like in the late 70s, because people didn't want dollars. You're welcome, John Colorado. Yeah, I agree with Lord Humongous, tangible versus intangible. I think there's a chart. I think if you look at ingoldwetrust.com, their latest report, incrementum report, they talk about how undervalued commodities are versus the stock market or paper assets. It's at over 100-year low. And gold, of course, has done well because it's more also a monetary commodity. But I expect that not to last for too long. And that's why I agree with Lord Humongous. Lord Humongous says, I have a big fan base in Colorado. Great. MM says JS Mindset interviewed Ted Butler. I'll have a look. I do subscribe to the JS Mindset YouTube channel. Tony Vega, what are your thoughts on digital currency backed by gold? Uh, well, I mean, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, Glint is backed by gold, or it has gold. You actually can spend the gold. Uh, I guess not directly, but there's the foreign exchange transaction. But digital backed by gold, yeah, I mean, I would prefer, of course, that we go back to using gold as a form of payment, but like a currency, coins, people say, oh, it's too bulky, but a little sovereign is like over 300 pounds. It's easier to carry than 300 pounds in £5 notes. But I think the importance of gold is more as a store of value. I think I would actually like to see silver make a comeback as a barterable commodity, as money, silver change. I think that would be great. And talking about barterability, I'm going to be interviewing Lynette Zhang on Wednesday. So she's coming on my channel. Christopher K. Can I offer you a villa for a week under British possession of Montserrat? Would like to meet you. uh, yeah, I've heard of Montserrat. I'm not. Where is it again? Let's have a look. British overseas. I don't know how I'd get there. Where? All right. Yeah, it's in the Caribbean. Okay, that would be interesting. Um, I mean, I used to sail a lot when I was a little boy, and my dad was a sailor. Maybe I should buy a boat and sail from the UK to Montserrat. Um, Dontro on Shambos, why not have a big mortgage? You're paying it off in inflated fiat. Um, yeah, that's a good question. Uh, my philosophy, I had a mortgage back in the mid 90s after we got married. My wife and I, uh, when we were having our daughter, we bought a family home. We took a fairly big mortgage for that time. I've been able to pay it off, and it's the value of the property that I'm in. It's not the original property, but it's gone up, of course. But I would say there's going to be, that's one thing I wanted to talk about. Right now, let's say in the UK with this crisis, people are getting mortgage deferment or a holiday. And I think that's going to be a big problem because this is not going to last for forever. I think they're going to keep it going till uh, you can apply for it until the end of October. But if you are still quite young and you're comfortable and sure about the income that you're getting that you can pay your mortgage off with, then I say fine. But I think the best thing is to try to pay off your mortgage. Why do you want to be dependent? Why do you want to be beholden to a banker or a lender, for that matter? Billy calls it marketability. Yeah. Yeah, Golden Gate. I'll see if I can have some time to listen to that. Christopher K, are you in the UK or in Montserrat? Brendan Smith has an interview about an hour long, clearest explanation of current situation. Yeah, I said, yeah, I'll have a look at it if I've got some time. I listened to, is it Harvey or Harry Dent? I don't even know his name. The guy well, he was saying that gold was going to drop to 700. Now he's saying it's only going to drop to 1,000. But yeah, I don't think he's got a clue. He said that the safest place to be is U.S. debt, because he said you have to have cash. But if you look at the Federal Reserve note at cash, it's a debt instrument. So, and I'm not even sure that we're going to get his deflationary collapse. And even if we do you really want to hold on to debt when there's a deflationary collapse, especially with the U.S. Treasury issuing so much debt? I think it's crazy. I don't think he understands it, Andrew, because he said in the 30s, the last time there was a deflation in the U.S., gold was, he said it was abandoned or something. He didn't actually mention that gold was confiscated. If gold wasn't that important in the deflation or depression, why would the U.S. government have confiscated it? And he said, "Oh, it's difficult to say where the price was," and it isn't. He hasn't done his homework because the price of gold was revalued from $20.67 an ounce to 35. So that's a huge move up percentage-wise. And if you look at mining companies like Homestake Mining, which was the biggest mining company in the U.S. at the time, it was up about 500% in the 1930s. John Colorado, I wouldn't borrow money to buy gold or silver. No, I wouldn't do that. Definitely not. I I mean, you can do it if you want, but the way I see things is I want to be, yeah, maybe I won't do as well as you do, but I feel I want peace of mind. I don't want to be worried about a loan. That's another important thing. Peace of mind is like a rare commodity, difficult to achieve. Yeah, I think that's Richard Russell. He used to write doubt theory letters, stock market newsletter. He died a few years ago, and I always remember him saying, "Yeah, it's great to do well in your investments, in your savings, and protect yourself and your family. But in the end of the day, you want to have peace of mind as well." Golden Gate, do you think will win? Who do you think will win the presidential election? The deep state. Yeah, that's who's going to win it. No matter who wins, the deep state will still be in control. Elections don't matter. I've told many people, forget about politics. It's just a kabuki theater, as John Titus from Best Evidence told me on Friday. Yeah, so I don't think it matters who wins the election. It's still, everything is going to go to plan. And I think their plan for us is to bring down, it's a controlled demolition of the economy. And that's why you have to have precious metals. It is the elite's money, gold. I remember Lindsey Williams always telling us that. Don't know if any of you ever listened to Lindsey Williams. Haven't heard from him. Someone said he's passed on. I'm not sure. Murray, thank you for the super chat. Murray says Trump is the perfect fall guy. Well, Trump is just part of the. He's just like and I'm gonna get a lot of thumbs down for this, but I don't care. He's just playing the game. He's just he's just like an actor. Well, he did do television work for many years, didn't he? So he's used to it, and so is Joe Biden and all the other politicians. I would say the only politician that I would maybe think would try to do something different was Ron Paul, but of course they couldn't have him as president. Uh, Brady, I hadn't heard that silver blocks out 5G. I hadn't. Not surprising though. So just one story here that I was reading about small businesses. Uh, and I do subscribe to the FT. I know they're a globalist organization, but sometimes they write things that are good to read, interesting information. And they're saying here that the stock market in the U.S. is reflecting just the health of big corporations, and they talk about how small businesses they represent 50% of employment, and they're in trouble. The small businesses, like the small restaurants, independent companies. And the same thing goes for the UK. In the UK as well, the mortgage deferment, I think a lot of people are going to have a rude awakening when they have to start paying their mortgage again. We got the furlough scheme in the UK. July is the last month where the employer doesn't have to pay anything. And then from August until October, the employer is going to have to take more and more, gonna have to pay more and more for the furlough and not the government. And I think a lot of people are gonna be laid off. So, and the same thing is happening in the U.S. And I don't have to tell you guys that there's so much going on about a second wave. And I think that again is going to keep people uncertain, especially small businesses. Why are they going to uh, lend from, or sorry, why are they going to borrow from the governments, even if it's at very low rates, if they're not sure if there's going to be any business to do in the next year or 2 or 5 years? Thank you, Alex Miles. Thumbs up, he says. Brady Girding says Ron Paul is a Mason playing his role. Yeah, I've heard that before about him being a Freemason, and I'm not a Freemason, but not sure. I mean, I think they have a lot of power, the Freemasons, but like with any institution, some people are probably not as powerful. But you could be right. I don't know. There's no one really, I guess, we can trust, is there? Brady Girding, what do you look at when buying stocks? Well, Brady, to be honest, I've always been more of a currency guy. But yeah, I mean, the kind of stocks that I've looked at in the past is more the mining stocks. Um, I have to say, I'm not like a stock market or equity company analyst. I'll usually look at the overall market, and but I'm not heavily involved in the stock market. But I would say right now, yeah, it's difficult to value stocks because the currency is really there is no currency. It's like John X just said, the dollar is I owe you nothings. So it's very hard. I do have a Benjamin Graham book about security analysis, but that was written in 1934 when the currency was still sound. So I guess there's the PE earnings, but nowadays as well, it's hard to know how well a company is doing. I guess you need to look at if they're buying back a lot of stock, if their earnings look good, just because they've retired a lot of the shares by buying them. So that's what I would say. But I don't advise people on the stock market. I look more at the bigger picture. Graham Hobbs, it's not just rumors about a second wave. My three astrologers all talk about it coming. Well, it's coming because that's their plan, I guess. And also viruses or the influenza it always comes back. But I definitely think they're playing it up. They're making it more than what it is because they want to change the way we live. And as I said earlier, there is a way to fight them is to refuse to do what we used to do before lockdown. I know we have to give up a lot, but I think if enough people do it and we hurt their pockets, they might think again. Dispersing weight, Harry Dent is a yeah, I won't say the word. I was thinking the same thing today when I was listening to that video, but I try to be civil. So yeah, I agree with that, with what you said there. Yeah, that's right. June 12th, 1776. That's the best thing. Don't acquiesce, don't consent. Uh, Golden Gate, although the deep state will win, we seem to be affected socially by the policies of the left or right, depending on who wins. Please give your thoughts. Thank you. Well, that's because as John Titus said, when you allow uh, private banks to control the issuance of the currency, they don't care who makes the laws. So the only way to go back to a republic, I would say, or a rule of law is to get rid of the Federal Reserve. Of course, things won't be perfect, but things are never perfect. But I think people would be freer if we didn't have a Federal Reserve and if we allowed the Constitution your Constitution already says how the money should be controlled in the U.S. and it's by the people, right? Technically, you should be able to, let's say, go to Colorado or Alaska and mine for gold and take that gold to a mint, a United States mint, and have them mint it into $20 piece or $10 piece. That's how money is. That's what the Constitution says, and that's what you have to go back to. So if if you take out the sound money, you allow the private bankers to control the monetary system, like the Federal Reserve. They're going to buy everything. They're going to buy the universities, the politicians, the media. And unfortunately, that's where you are right now. Politics is just a pretend. So you think that you're still in charge, but they've been in charge since 1913, I guess, December 23rd. Jack Nichols, yeah, I saw that as well. Dr. Vernon, he's talking about the pharmaceutical companies and all the advisors here in the UK for the government. They're all related to those pharmaceutical companies. Actually, I got my end the Fed mug today. That's interesting. We were talking about the Fed. Yeah, Jack Nichols says he's boycotting businesses who are cashless. Well, the other day, I think it was Wednesday, I went with a couple of friends from my golf club. We went to another golf course, and it was very hot here. I usually walk when I play golf, but we hired a golf cart. We call them buggies here in the UK. And we were three, and I asked one of my friends, "Do you want to come with me on the cart?" He said, "Fine." So we put both our bags there, and we were riding all the time, two of us. And we noticed people were looking at us, and then we realized that we were only supposed to be one by cart. And then my friend said, "Well, if they come and tell us off or say we can't ride together," he said, "Oh, I'll tell him that we're lovers." And I was laughing, but you see, I didn't even notice. I didn't even think about it when I went to hire the cart. But at this golf club, I went to buy a bottle of water to take with me, and it was a pound 30, and I gave him a 5 pound note, and the guy said, "No, we only take card." And I said, "Well, that's illegal because cash is legal tender." And I think he was already quite stressed, the guy behind the bar. And he said, "Oh, do you want me to go call my boss?" And I just wanted a small bottle of water, so I did pay with my card. So yeah, they're trying to get you to not use cash, and I think that's wrong. Unless they pass a law saying it's not legal tender anymore, I think that's illegal. Hybrid parts, are we expecting a turbulent week? Well, the markets didn't finish off very well last week. There's a lot of talk, of course, about this second wave, all the new cases. And I know that one of the reasons there's a lot of new cases in the US is because they're testing a lot more. And some people argue that almost everyone has this COVID in their body. So I don't know, but yeah, I think yeah, the markets are how can I say set to go lower. The stock markets. I did a video back in the end of March, just after the stock market bottomed. I thought that was the bottom at the time. I was Luckily, I was right about that, but I said we could go up to like 24,000 or a little more, and we've gone a lot higher in the Dow. Of course, we've gone to like 27,000. But time wise, I thought it would recover for like 13 weeks, and then we'd start going down. And we're I think the 13th week was over last week. So it's starting to turn right around that 13th week. How did I come to that 13th week? Well, I looked at the recovery the stock market had from November 1929 to 1930. I think it was April, and it took about 22 weeks. But as the drop this year was much quicker than the drop in 1929, I shortened the period because uh, the drop this year took 6 weeks. In 1929, it took 10 weeks, the initial drop. So I took 2/3 of 22 weeks. That came to around 13 weeks. I've seen other people like Charles Denner. He thinks the stock market will top around now, this last week in June. So who knows? And there's also a really good technical analyst called Michael Oliver. He's been on King World News. He forecast that big drop in March in the stock market. And he thinks now we're going to go down for the next 18 months or 2 years. But he doesn't think we're going to crash. It's just going to be very gradual and really painful bear market, like with very little rebounds. So who knows? We'll have to see. Tony Vega, how come the gold price dropped from over 31,000 to below 30,000 in the last 48 hours? uh, I'm not sure what you're going on about there, Tony Vega. Uh, I haven't seen. Is that for how much weight? Because the ounce of gold is not 31,000 or 30,000. So Lord Humongous says he thinks the Nasdaq is going to get hammered. Yeah, the Nasdaq has outperformed all the other major indices, and if you look at it as well, the companies that have done really well are basically Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, uh, Netflix, I guess, or I don't know. But the big, the FANG stocks. There's five stocks that have done really well, and I think they're like a big percentage of the gains in the stock market are because of those big tech stocks. Andrew Bennett says the drop that Tony Vega is talking about is the US debt clock. Well, I don't look at the debt clock for the price of gold. I look at the debt clock for the amount of debt. Uh, if that's changes because maybe the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, is revised. I've noticed that they revised the, for example, for 2024, the debt was forecast at around 47 trillion a couple of weeks ago. It's now come down to 45 trillion. I think it's because they think there won't be as much debt. They think the economy is going to do better, so there will be less debt. So that debt clock does change because, and it will probably change quite sharply in the next year or two, all the data there, because things are so uncertain. I've noticed as well the GDP counter for the debt clock for right now is started to go up. Up until a few weeks ago, it was the GDP was going down, so that's probably why it's changing that price. Even though I don't think that price is significant, really, I don't really follow that. I don't know why it's there. Lord Humongous, Grapes of Wrath. Yeah, that's a very good book. I've read that book. Also, Of Mice and Men. So Jack London. JD says Morgan Stanley. Second wave is coming, but won't derail the V-shaped recovery. I'm not sure how they figured that out. Golden Gate, one world government. I think they're trying hard to implement that. They might succeed for a few years, but I don't think it will work. It's never worked before. Many people have tried it throughout the millennia, and I think people won't stand for it. John Colorado, yeah. I mean, silver should outperform gold. It doesn't mean I'm going to get rid of my gold to buy silver. I have silver as well, but yeah, it should outperform gold. Low blood low blood pressure. What kind of great food is available in London? Well, normally there's very good restaurants in London, but they're all closed right now. But yeah, we have all kinds of food, English food. Some people might not like English food, but it's good. All kinds of food, really. Chinese, Indian, French, Italian, English food, fish and chips, roast beef. K-shaped recovery, up for some, down for most. I guess that's the Wall Street folk and the government folk will do well from that. Pablo Pina, what is your insight and perspective of the Freemasons? Um, I don't know much about them. I mean, there's a lot of information that they control a lot of things. I'm not one, but yeah, they're quite powerful. I think actually, I do know a little bit about it. I think a lot of the heads of states, a lot, prime ministers, presidents, chief of police, and all that. A lot of them are Freemasons. So I think some of them, of course, the lower level, they just join it because it's like a club. But yeah, they're very powerful, I think. So uh, I think, JFK did that speech about the covert organizations. And I think he was warning us about the Freemasons. John Meyer, thank you for the super chat. He says, keep on keeping on, Mario. Please support Mario, dear friends. Thank you, John. Yeah, so Freemasonry, I think there are a lot of people, I think lower level people, who do it because they do a lot of charity work. But I think at the very top, uh, it's a secretive organization. I think Tony Blair was a Freemason. He's like George Bush. I'm not sure if he was W. Bush, but he was a Skull and Bones. Uh, it's called Synarchy, which is ruled by the secret societies. Synarchy. It's I think it's spelled like this. So that's the kind of rule we have. There was a guy called Christopher Story here in the UK. He died in 2011, and he used to write a currency letter, and he even advised Margaret Thatcher in the 80s. He was an economist, and he actually said that we're being run by the secret services, the intelligence agencies. They're the people who run governments, and I think they're probably really closely related to the Freemasonry. So yeah, that's what we have, Synarchy, and they're related to the bankers as well, and all that. So we don't really have a republic, or we don't even have here in the UK a system where the sovereign, the queen or the king, have any power really, because a sovereign should look after the other sovereigns. We're supposed to be sovereign in a monarchy, and the head sovereign, the monarch, is supposed to defend the sovereign's interests. But I don't see Queen Elizabeth doing that anymore. She's not in charge, really. Sac Media says Freemasonry is dying. Well, I'm not too sure about that. Low blood pressure says I applied to the CIA out of college, never got a call back. I saw an article the other day. I didn't read it, but the headline said that the CIA now is advertising uh, for, and I when I was subscribing to the Economist magazine last year, and I didn't subscribe them for a long time because I don't think it's a good magazine, and I don't want to keep financing those people. But they had adverts for the CIA, employment adverts. I think they like people who speak languages, so maybe don't know if you had any other languages. David Bradley, New English King John III, aka Gregory Hallett? Question mark. Someone sent me a video about this guy like a month or so ago. I would say that's a joke, really. I don't think it's got any credibility. Tayeb Hussein, do you see Zionist movement lose their power? Well, not really. They're still in control of a lot of things, I would say. Lord Humongous, CIA stands for Cocaine Import Agency. Yeah, I think what's his name? Bill Clinton was heavily involved back in the Mena, Arkansas days. And I think there's even a good movie that came out about the pilot. Um, that was. I think it's with Brad Pitt who did the movie. I think he was the actor. So it's very interesting. Yeah, that's how the intelligence agencies. That's how they fund their black ops is through arms and drug deals. I mean, and that's public information. We saw the Iran Contra affair in the 80s. That's what the CIA was doing. They were selling arms to the Contras. Um, they were selling arms to Iran, and I mean to fight. Well, they're selling arms, I think, to Iran to, and then with that money, they were financing the Contras in Nicaragua. I mean, that's the kind of stuff they do. Um, yeah, Golden Gate. I think when you have control of the money, you can control a lot of things. So that's what I would say. Yeah, that's right. Gary Seals, I think, only my POV. That's the pilot. It's a really good, interesting movie. The 21 trillion missing. Yeah, we know about the 21 trillion. Made in America, Tom Cruise. It's Tom Cruise, not Brad Pitt. That's right. So, Dazzy Burning, Ripple will unlock Nostro Costro accounts 27 trillion. Well, I'm not too sure about that, but Christopher Story used to talk about a guy called Leo Wonta. I think he was involved in all this missing trillions, and he was an ambassador, Ambassador Leo Wonta. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of him. Yeah, Oliver North. He was the guy who organized the gun running for the Iran Contra affair. Abacentry, you could be right. I think the EU wants to crack down on the offshore business, and the UK, the British, the city of London is the biggest offshore. Well, a lot of the offshore tax havens are British overseas territories, and all that money flows through the City of London and the Bank of England, of course, turns a blind eye to that money, to where it comes from. They don't care that it comes through the City of London as long as it stays out in the offshore territories. So they just act as a liaison between yeah, they don't care. And I think the EU was going to start cracking down on that. That could be one of the reasons. SAC Media, what are the risks of holding physical gold coins? Can the government ever demand them back? What do you mean by demand them back? I mean, if you buy back, I mean, when you buy something, it's yours. The only way they can take it from you is to take it by force. So I'm not sure what you mean by demanding it back, because gold is like a market. It's money of the market. So if you do a deal with someone, you do someone a favor or make a product for them, they pay you with your gold. What's the government got to do with that? It's not the government's money. Butchie Harding, a lot of phony people on here. Okay. All right, I'll take a few more questions, and then yeah, we've gone for an hour already. John Meyer says gold is trust, fiat is treason. I agree with that. Brady Girding Mario is a 1%. No, I'm not part of the 1%. Yeah, there was in 1933 the U.S. government did confiscate gold, but at the time gold was money, and I don't think they're going to confiscate again. But it's always possible. They already confiscate people's wealth through taxation and inflation right now. So, uh, Mr. Fadupable, yeah, I've heard of John Coleman. I've listened to him before. He's an interesting guy. The Committee of 300. Yeah. Justin Timber, how to value gold? Well, gold is money, so everything you value it by how much you can buy it. You know, in Weimar Germany, when the currency collapsed, someone had an ounce of gold, a young German, uh, and one of the American tourists gave it to him, and he was able to buy a hotel. It depends how desperate people are, what they'll give you for an ounce of gold. That's how you value it. Vajra, thank you for your super chat. Any thoughts on civil war in the U.S.? Good thing that you asked me that because I forgot about it. I was reading something in French. Luckily, I can read French, and it was an interview with a French general by a guy called John. What was his name? Yovanovitch. Yeah, he's a French reporter. And so this French general right now is talking about the crisis. He thinks it's been overblown, but he thinks there's a lot of instability, social instability in the US. He sees civil war in the US, this French general, but he also sees it in France. He thinks it could happen in a lot of countries around the world with what's going on right now. So it's not just an American phenomenon. And I found that really interesting. Uh, his name is General Tauzin, Tauzin, and his first name is Didier Di. I'll put it here. I'll put the link. It's in French, but some of you might want to read it. Some of you might know French, but and the general's name. So yeah, I think there's a lot of division right now, not just in the US, but also in the UK, in France, and other countries. And I think they're stoking the division, the powers that be. Vincent McGowan, when is the right time to sell gold? Well, when is the right time to spend money? I mean, you should know when I don't know when you want to spend money because I view gold as a savings. So whenever you need is for a rainy day. And I would say as well, uh, bigger picture wise, in terms of investment, when the price of gold, 1 ounce of gold, will buy you one Dow, I think that's a good time to shift away from gold. Not completely, because I think people should always have some gold because that's money, it's savings. So that's how I would look at it. I think the Dow gold ratio is still around 14 right now. Historically, when there is a complete reset, so to speak, that ratio goes to 1 to 1. I think it could go even lower, meaning that you could get even 2 Dows for 1 ounce of gold eventually. So I think it's still, for me, it's still too early to decide on what to do uh, or how to. I've seen stories, and I did think about this as well. Well, we need to move to the countryside with this crisis, but I think a lot of people are doing that, and I think we need to be more careful, not be hasty. I don't think this crisis is anywhere near being over. So, and even people who are thinking of, there's a lot of people here in the UK they're starting to book their holidays because they're going to open these air bridges, which is a stupid thing as well. But I think I don't even want to go abroad right now because uh, I could be somewhere, I don't know, in Italy or France, and all of a sudden they lock the UK down again. They say, "Oh, things are getting worse again," and then you're stuck there. So I think we need to be careful about that as well. Okay. uh, Thank you, everyone, for showing up. I always enjoy having a chat with you guys. Sorry if I didn't see all the questions. It's harder and harder, of course, when you get more people, but I tried my best. Uh, I wish you all a great rest of the weekend or a great beginning of the week if you are, of course, in Australia and other places like that.